Welcome up! John Cena, the Hollywood celebrity and WWE star, was a protagonist of political news this week. In fact, the actor of Fast and Furious had to apologize to his Chinese fans for calling Taiwan a country. When he was visiting Taiwan, he said it would be the first country to see the 9th installment of the Fast and Furious franchise. This outraged Chinese fans that of course argue Taiwan is not a state, but just an island part of China. So, the question is Taiwan a state? In international relations, there are two main theories and a few hybrid versions discussing when an organization can be acknowledged as a state. According to the traditional declaratory theory, Taiwan is a state. The Montevideo Convention, a treaty of 1933 between a number of states in the Americas, has created the rule of thumb to identify a state: a population, a territory, a sovereign government, and the ability to enter in relations with other states. Meeting these criteria is sufficient to be identified as states. On the other hand, according to the traditional constitutive theory, Taiwan is a state only in the eyes of 14 others. In fact, according to this theory, only recognition makes an entity a state. Yet, this is deeply problematic because other states might not have at heart the recognition of another entity. Particularly, countries who have regions aiming to secede are likely not to recognize other controversial organizations. For example, Serbia argues Kosovo is part of its territory and its institutions do not make it a state. Given its particular situation, Serbia will never recognize Taiwan, unless of course it decides to recognize Kosovo as well. Taiwan is an island. It was self-governing before the 17th century, after which China conquered it, ruling it for 2 centuries. Japan gained control of Taiwan in 1895 after the First Sino-Japanese War, and Taiwan became a colony. Following World War II, Taiwan was returned to nationalist Chinese control. Yet, immediately after the end of World War II, in China started a civil war between the communists of Mao and the nationalist government. The civil war ended in 1949 when the Communist Army defeated the nationalists, forcing the former government to flee mainland China towards Taiwan. Since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, China has claimed sovereignty over Taiwan, sticking to a one China policy. Hence, there is a pan-blue coalition supporting unification and a pan-green coalition which regards Taiwan as an independent sovereign state, opposes reunification with China, and seeks wide diplomatic recognition. Because of its one China policy, China has insisted that nations cannot have official relations with China and Taiwan. This has caused Taiwan to have very few formal diplomatic ties. One of these is the United States, that by the way do not recognize Taiwan as a country. Moreover, China is incredibly strong on the international stage. There are very few countries willing to challenge China. But we must recognize that Taiwan is a major economic player, and by some it is even regarded as a democracy. Following Chinese instructions, the United Nations has recognized Taiwan as a part of China since 1971. In fact, between 1945 and 1971, the China of the United Nations was Taiwan. Yet, mainland China was able to enter the UN and to change this initial decision, becoming the only official China of the United Nations. As said, today only 14 countries out of 193 in the UN recognize Taiwan as a state. Nevertheless, one of these 14 is the Vatican, which is also not acknowledged as a state by the UN. Now, John Cena has only to sell a film, of course. I gave you the elements. Is Taiwan a state? As usual, you can find the sources in the references section of the video description. Thank you for watching.